Today I want to talk about the evolution of gaming and gamers. This particular subject is interesting for me given that I actually worked in the video game industry for a good number of years. I think I started somewhere in the 2000s and then continued on until eventually I moved on to other areas of tech. Prior to working in the industry, I played a lot of StarCraft. StarCraft was probably my favorite game. I was pretty good at Halo and a lot of the first-person shooters. I mean, back in the 90s, we didn't have Call of Duty just yet, essentially. At the time, I didn't think of it as programming. I didn't even think of it as code or computer science. I just thought of it as this, how do I use computers better thingy? That's kind of how I approached it. The Godfather, which was EA's answer to Grand Theft Auto, or GTA. So they basically were doing what they called 50-cent games, where they would negotiate a contract with Hollywood, like Paramount or somebody like that, and say, hey, we see that you have all this IP, intellectual property, like Godfather, and we would like to license your IP so that, and what we'll do is we'll give you half the profits. You let us use the license. We'll develop a game around it, and then we'll develop that for the Xbox or the PlayStation or the PC, or the PSP was big at the time, and we'll keep this license for the next 10 plus years, and we'll renew at that time. And the reason why EA and friends wanted the IP was because when it came time to like Christmas time, Uncle Billy is going to go to Walmart or Costco or wherever, and see, and he needs to buy little Billy, a present. And so he's like, okay. So when he goes and starts browsing the video games aisle, he's going to see Grand Theft Auto, which would have some gangster beating up hookers, or it could be something a little bit more classy like The Godfather, which he probably watched the movie, liked, and so then would more likely buy The Godfather over the Grand Theft Auto, which, he's an older guy. He doesn't play games. He doesn't really care. So to him, he was kind of blind to what GTA was, other than it had all this marketing everywhere, but he would probably pick something he's familiar with, like Godfather. And so Uncle Billy gives little Billy The Godfather for Christmas. And so I was working on Godfather for probably a year or two, and then I was working on things like, at the time it was Mob Face, so it's like, how do you create your own 3D animated character, and then with just an Xbox controller, can you use sliders or whatever to alter the 3D mesh, i.e. the shape of the character's face or clothes, change out the different clothes, maybe change out the texturing on the face so you could add a scar or something, maybe the size of the scar, the tinting, which will change the texture, the hair, add apparel like hats and glasses, and in this way you would have your own 3D character or your own 3D mobster, and so then when you're playing the game, your character is customized to you, or you'd build out maps, or you'd build out different messaging systems or whatever. So I learned a lot there, and at that time, that's kind of where I crossed over to the dark side, I call it, where you're not so much interested in the art. You're like, wow, this code thing is very powerful, and I'm on the Xbox. Wow, that's huge. Like, people have actually heard of what I'm working on. This is really crazy. I remember even uploading a video to YouTube of one of the trailers for The Godfather or Mob Face or some of the stuff I actually worked on, or built, and then put it on YouTube, and it got huge hits. Like, kids really liked anything gaming related or anything film related, and so that was very exciting. And so I really doubled and tripled down on the coding thing at that time, and then eventually the gaming thing would pop up again, where Playdom was a big one. Zynga was another big one. Disney ended up buying all of that. And they were producing really, really crappy games at the time, just really awful ones. Like, they were trying to be MMO, but massive multiplayer online game, and they couldn't really pull off massive multiplayer online game. And guess what kind of games that they were producing? Oh, wow, I'm impressed. Poker. Yeah, we had this online casino. It's like one server. It's like a Red 5 server. And yeah, we couldn't figure out how to put, in number of people on there. So we're just going to spin up a new Red 5 server and they'll call that a casino. And it'll hold up to so many, like 1,000 players. And then they would just keep spinning up. They would claim they could do 100,000 players simultaneously, which is a lie. but that's essentially what they would do. And then they would just try to get you and your friends into the right server so that it would look like that you're able to play with each other online anonymously. They also were trying to get the online gambling laws changed so that you're allowed to do it in the US. In the UK, you're allowed to. Zynga and friends wanted to do that. Zynga was able to go public and go IPO and raise like $4 billion, and then they crashed to like $2 billion and never really recovered because their games sucked. I didn't say that. And then Disney went out and bought out all their competitors and then played on and Friends and then put that all under Disney Interactive. And it's kind of interesting to see Disney playing in technology because they were initially funding a lot of stuff, or they were leasing out the intellectual property to Electronic Arts or to a Lucasfilm. And the IP leasing thing was basically called the 50-cent deal because you give half your profits to Disney and maybe some money up front for the exclusive right to monetize that particular IP, that particular property, like Godfather, right? So that was a 50-cent deal. And so Electronic Arts would say, okay, so let me get this straight. We could spin up like 20 development teams. We could do Godfather, Bond 007, Lord of the Rings, The Simpsons, all these different IPs that maybe would fall under a Viacom or a Paramount. And then we could... So we know that it'll sell during Christmas. So Christmas Q4 was a big time for us. We were like, okay, we're going to spend 1 to 4 years developing this IP. Then we're going to develop in our own technology, which we can patent or whatever, right? So Paramount owns the copyright of Godfather. We own the online exclusive right to monetize Godfather, but we own the technology and the IP that goes with it. Then we would use these 50-cent deals to fund our own initiative, which was Spore at the time. So in this way, you're basically using the IP as a funding mechanism for your own technology development, your own studio development, your own corporate development, but eventually your own IP development. So then that way, Spore, which was really huge at the time, or was going to be, Will Wright from The Sims took I think it was a multi-billion-dollar check. I don't know how much money EA actually gave him, but they basically gave him a studio in Oakland and then fed him all the technologies that were being created by the other studios like Godfather and Friends. Just everything we built, Spore had that at their disposal. If they wanted more information from you, the developer, they would just give you a call and you would work with them on stuff. I personally, I think I was on like at least 4 different IPs, but you would share code with all of the studios, including Spore. Then this way, the idea was that with these 50-cent deals funding Spore, then eventually Spore could be copyrighted by EA. And then with all the marketing, if it was successful, then because it's IP, you can then lease the IP back to Paramount or Viacom and Friends, and then they would go reverse stream, meaning that they have to pay for the right to monetize Spore from EA, as opposed to EA buying the right to monetize Godfather. So art imitates life, and then life imitates art. I saw this kind of scheme just play out many, many times, right? When I was at Lucasfilm, for instance, their claim to fame was Star Wars. Star Wars was their biggest IP, followed by Indiana Jones. And then there was a couple other ones like The Labyrinth, but I think that was pretty bad. But anyways, Lucas was able to survive like 30, 40 years by merchandising off of Star Wars. So because he was the copyright holder for Star Wars, he would then anytime someone wanted to put Star Wars onto, say, a lunch pail or somebody made like a R2D2 lookalike, make a mailbox, a post office mailbox look like an R2D2 unit by putting stickers around it. And Lucas was famous for sending in his lawyers and going, that's pretty interesting what you did there. So I'll tell you what, here's a cease and desist order. Sent with official legal copyhead, and that means that they have to stop manufacturing this R2D2 sticker decal or this lunch pail or this Star Wars lookalike thing, right, for copyright infringement. And then he would come back around and say, but you know what, it's such a good idea. I tell you what, why don't you give me half your profits and I'll let you keep doing this. And in this way, then Lucas's most successful company out of the 5 companies he owned wasn't Industrial Light and Magic. It wasn't Lucas Games. It wasn't Star Wars Online or Lucas Online or Skywalker Sound or The Ranch. It was IP licensing. So, which is just a handful of lawyers who would then sue everybody who was trying to use Star Wars and do copyright infringement. And then through this merchandising, he would have deals with like Hasbro and Lego, and they would gladly pay for the right to monetize Star Wars. I was specifically working on Lucas Online, which was a new division where basically they were saying, okay, well, after the whole Pixar debacle, that's another story for another time, Lucas decided, well, Pixar was super successful. I should have kept Pixar instead of selling it to Steve Jobs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin up Lucas Animation in Singapore. I'm going to get some special tax breaks to help fund that thing. And then I'm going to take the copyright material that Lucas Animation created, i.e. Star Wars the Animated Series, and I'm going to build a online video site for that. And then sell ads against that and maybe do a couple partnerships with anyone who wants to do something with Star Wars Online and Star Wars IP Online, and then sell the animated series rights to a TV and to a film. So he would sell the film rights to, say, Paramount, and they would argue and haggle over the price and stuff. And then he sold the online rights to Yahoo, and then he sold the TV rights to TNT, which was rebranding themselves at the time, and I think they were called Spike TV. And so then they were pairing up mixed martial arts, the UFC, with Star Wars, the animated series. And then that way they would seem more edgy than, say, a Fox or an ABC or an NBC or any of these other networks. And so this way, Spike had more original content. Lucasfilm had multiple ways to monetize Star Wars, the animated series. And then through Paramount, then they would do a distribution deal for film. So then he monetized like 3 or 4 different ways, one through his own website, one through Yahoo, one through Spike, and then again through Paramount. And then eventually he kept the merchandising rights and sold that to Hasbro, Lego, and Friends. And so you're like, Jesus Christ. He monetized Star Wars 5, 6, 7 different ways all at the same time, and built a new company in the process. It was pretty impressive. And at the end of the day, it was the 50-cent deal, where basically if you're the copyright holder, you can sell the merchandising or the monetization rights 4, 5, 6 different ways while building companies and technologies and funding it just through copyright. This is why Lucas and Disney were constantly lobbying to get the copyrights extended past, I think the law was something like 72 years, like what they thought a natural human lifespan would be, to eventually it went like to 90 and 100, and I think right now it's up to 135. And a lot of Disney's catalog is almost due for copyright expiration, and I need to go double check on it, but they're trying to get that up to like 200, 300, 400 years, 1,000, a millennia, because that's the lifeblood of a Disney corporation or Electronic Arts or a Lucasfilm. So much so that you see Disney going around trying to go like, okay, our copyrights are expiring. That means we can't do these 50-cent deals anymore. That means we're going to be out of money soon. Oh no, lions and tigers, oh my, what do I do? And so at that time, Disney bought Pixar for the Pixar because they had a lot of when Steve Jobs left Apple, he bought Pixar from Lucasfilm and then turned it from a research and design studio into a feature film animated studio, right? But full length 3D animated film, i.e., Pixar. And he was building out a lot of original characters, whereas Disney was still redoing Winnie the Pooh and redoing Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. And these copyrights were expiring in the not too distant future. But Pixar just had a fresh new catalog of stuff. So they said, well, let's just buy Pixar for $6 billion instead of renewing a distribution deal with them. Oh, George Lucas, hey, guess what? You're getting really old, buddy. How would you like to sell Star Wars and the catalog, all of Lucasfilm, to Disney for $4.2 billion, I believe? And then Marvel Comics. Oh my God, you have a huge, giant catalog of comic book heroes that everyone at Comic-Con really likes that we could turn into films, games, merchandise. Why don't we buy you out for $4.2 billion as well? So now, fast forward to today, you're just flooded with all the Marvel comic book heroes. A lot of the Star Wars stuff is being rebranded under the Disney film. Even the video games is really hard to do, so they would rather license that out to an EA who's really good at it and let them build it. So coming full circle, like the whole business is centered on copyrights in the 50-cent deal. So with this 50-cent deal, you're able to develop new technologies, which will then lead back to that whole virtuous cycle of art imitating life and life imitating art, to where we see real drones. In today's world, we see real technology, stuff that looks like magic, a lot of movies, a lot of entertainment, and it's just round and round we go. Art imitates life, and life imitates art.
Little time for the child within you. Don't be afraid to be young and free. Undo the locks and throw away the keys, and take off your shoes and socks and run you. La, 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 la. Give a little time for the child within you. Don't be afraid to be young and free. Undo the locks and throw away the keys, and take off your shoes and socks and run you. Run through the meadow and scare up the milking cows. Run down the beach kicking clouds of sand. Walk a windy weather day, feel your face blow away. Stop and listen, love you.
Bicycles, tricycles, ice cream, candy, lollipops, popsicles, licorice sticks, Solomon, Grundy, Raggedy Andy, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, home free.
Welcome back.